Welcome to the final word here at Trinity United Church of Christ. We just finished an amazing Good Friday worship experience with some absolutely stellar preachers from around the country, and we are excited that they have the opportunity to be able to share with us literally the final word after preaching today. We thank you that you're joining us today here at Trinity United Church of Christ. You can check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube, or you can just email us here at Trinity United Church of Christ. And I'm going to go around the room first, and I'm going to then ask some questions of our preachers, but several of them have to step out. So I'm going to start with none other than Dr. Melva Samson. Dr. Melva Samson is a part of the Wake Forest University Divinity School and teaches preaching, and we are excited that you are here.
He is thirsty. He is between the identities of human and divine. Yes, he is 100% human and he is 100% divine, but at the moment of his thirst, he is between identities. He is between what we'd say in seminary, an apocalyptic vision and an eschatological hope.
Dr. Samson.
I am excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are elated that you're here. I have a question for you.
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with the movie Brown Sugar?
Yes.
When did you fall in love with hip hop?
With hip hop, not preaching, right?
No,
Hip hop.
hip-hop, because
Yes,
hip-hop is connected to your
absolutely.
preaching.
Ooh, this is such a good question. So I am Generation X. I think there is never a time I've not been in love with hip hop. In terms of coming of age, I've come of age with the message, don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a juggle sometimes. It makes me wonder, you can't start that and not just finish the entire thing. I've always been, I identify as having a hip hop aesthetic in terms of, I think even my cadence is hip hop. Not intentionally, it just is. And absolutely the message, hip hop as being born of the people, from the people, for the people. Absolutely. I've always been in love with hip hop.
If you were to define your preaching in a hip hop aesthetic, which rapper would be closest?
MC
to you?
Light.
Come on. and why is that?
Listen, Light is just, when I think about, so this, you see I'm coming alive right now. When I think about this era of hip hop, this golden era of hip hop, I think about MC Light. I think about also those who were not as commercial and people whose names do not get mentioned anymore, like Sweet Tea. I don't know if folks remember Sweet Tea. Of course, Yo-Yo. Queen Latifah, who can forget Salt and Pepper? Who could forget go all the way back to Blondie? To what was the group that Angie Stone was in? I can't remember them, but one of them, the name was Blondie. But MC Light, because Light is hard in the sense of her flow is a little complex. You have to really listen, and yet she's rhythmic. As soon as you start hearing her, you just kind of go with it, and her voice is so melodic. So I would say MC Light.
MC Light. So I'm going to remember that now, from now on. Every time I see you, Dr. Sampson, you will be MC.
Hey, I'm here for it.
I love it. And we're also delighted that we have with us none other than Reverend Shalita Fomi, who is a staple here at Trinity United Church of Christ. And we are thankful that once again that you are visiting with us.
Soul with you. Goodbye, Trinity. May the Lord bless you real good. I got to get out of here, but I came to tell you, he's got the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. His hands put the light in the sky. His hands walked somebody back from depression. His hands anointed somebody's head with oil.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Dr. Moss.
Now, I want to ask a question of you. Who is the person who has influenced your preaching the most?
Probably two people. Probably the pastor under whom I got ordained, Dr. Lee P. Washington. His preaching is it's grace-filled. It is dynamic. There's like a Pentecostal charismatic expression to it. It's empowering. Yeah, probably him. I think now I'm listening a lot to Gina Stewart, Dr. Gina Stewart, kind of a dense argument and working through ideas and a celebration sort of at the end to bring it all together. But probably those two have influenced my preaching a lot, performatively or stylistically. Yeah.
Take us through your call story.
I think I got saved, as it were, however you want to consider that, at the age of 16. And I think I knew then that God was doing something special, but I don't think I knew it was preaching. It was about that time I was going to a lot of revivals in the Washington, D.C. area. And there were all these women who were coming through, Rita Twiggs and Bishop Iona Locke, and just all these women coming through these churches. And I was just so drawn to the proclamation ministry. And then I went away to the military and got married, got divorced, and went through a really crazy time in my life. And I was in my mid-20s. And I remember really trying to process what this burden was that I felt, but I didn't know what to do with it. I just knew that I loved writing. I knew that I was so drawn to the Word of God. I knew that I was studying the Word of God. Funny story, I'll never forget, I was living in an apartment and I had just gone through this breakup with my ex-husband. That's probably TMI. And I was in an apartment and I just started writing sermons, and I had not acknowledged the call to ministry yet. And then I would preach those sermons to myself in that 1-bedroom apartment. And I remember there was a moment where a neighbor downstairs used to blare his music all the time. And I remember going to him and saying, "Can you turn that music down? It's just too loud." And he said to me, "Nobody says anything when you up there preaching to yourself." Wow. And he said, "By the way, though, I hear it and it sounds good." And I think that's when I started to realize there was something there, even though I didn't know what it was. Again, at church, Dr. Lee Paul Washington, he does this appeal, this altar call, and he says, if you sense that God is calling you to ministry and you're having trouble putting your finger exactly on what that is, I want to have a conversation. I'm just going to clear my calendar all week and talk to those individuals. And I was one of those individuals. And we sat, we talked, and he helped me to clarify my call. But it's been many callings subsequent to that call.
Many callings.
Being called again and again. The first call was just to say yes. The second call was sort of to trust and believe that when the Lord called me away from 13 years of federal government service, that he was creating space for me in ministry in a professional, formal sense. So called away from traditional, I guess you would call secular employment, and then called to work in the church, and called to pastor, and then called to plant a church. And so there have been many, many callings over a period of time. But yeah, it's kind of a convoluted story, but it all seemed to come together. And it's this beautiful, messy tapestry. And at each stage, at each point, there were these interesting affirmations where God would give me this nod, this wink that you're right where you belong. And so, yeah.
What would you say to a young Reverend Shalita Fomi?
You are enough. You are enough. And You are enough. And you don't have to mimic anyone. You don't have to be ashamed of your story not reflecting or resembling somebody else's formation. That there is an audience for your voice, and that your pain is so not even just purposeful, but also necessary, and it's redemptive, and it is instrumental to what God is going to do with you and through you. So stand in that and be confident in your who-ness. That your who-ness is an expression of heaven in you, and you are enough. That's what I would tell the younger Shalita. That's what I told Shalita last week. And I'm sure we'll continue to have that conversation.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Reverend Fomi. With us today is a person I have known for over 30 years, Dr. Robert Scott, who is from Monticello, Mississippi, and made his way to Jackson State. And we are delighted that you are with us today.
When the children don't call you anymore, God will not forsake you. And when your loved one dies, God will not forsake you. Y'all, I'm trying not to let my Mississippi slip, but I feel something pushing me right now. But is there anybody here that know it's all right to go ahead and cry, and that it's all right to go ahead and admit you got some pain? Because he felt forsaken, you and I will never be forsaken.
Thank you, my friend, for allowing me to be here. And again, I consider myself to be the weed among the roses. These sisters have just blessed me in a very powerful, pastoral, and prophetic way today. So thank you for including me among this cadre of great preaching.
Thank you for being here. You bring to the table your roots from Mississippi, wherever you have pastored. What is it about Monticello, Jackson State? What is it that is unique that you bring? There's something in you, and it's not just what you say, it's how you do things.
Well, first of all, I started as a boy preacher. So, I was preaching when I was at Jackson State, and started as a boy preacher, acknowledged my call when I was 11 and did my initial sermon. Didn't get my license till I was 12 and ordained when I was 18 at the Oak Grove Baptist Church in Monticello, Mississippi. The Reverend Dr. Ellie McEwen was my pastor. And what I look at as accepting a calling at an early age really was a way of God preserving me until I got older to understand what that really meant. So in Mississippi, one of the things that they say is, coming from Mississippi, there are certain things you can do. I don't believe all that. However, there is something organic for me about not dissing or trying to unclaim where I come from. My hometown is small. We only got one stoplight. And if you sneeze, blink, or cough, you'll miss it. But I don't deny that I'm from Monticello, Mississippi. And the Lord just allowed for my trajectory, because I didn't want a pastor. The Lord allowed for my trajectory to go through Jackson State. And then I went to Duke Divinity School and then United Theological Seminary, where I got my doctoral degree. And I would say, Otis, you and I, we kind of have some of the same formative roots when it comes to preaching and pastoral work. The turn for me and the saving grace for me at Duke was connecting with Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor. And his first preaching class, we were the guinea pigs for his book, The Certain Sound of a Trumpet. In fact, my work is in that book. And there are just certain things he layered upon me that has had great impact upon how I develop my sermons. And then Y.T. Walker, I did my doctoral work with him at United Theological Seminary, and the late Dr. Charles Edward Booth is a father to me in every sense of the word, with the exception of blood. So I bring all of that to my pastoral work, to the preaching moment, and never really found my voice until I was about in my mid-30s, where I became comfortable in being from Mississippi, as well as what God is shaping and forging me to be.
Who did you emulate and you realized that you had to be authentic and not emulate that person anymore?
Great question. I would say that Dr. Booth really was a paradigm for me. His style, his presentation, but I knew I don't have a deep baritone voice. Doc had that voice that just, claimed your attention. But I'm a country boy from Mississippi, so I just really had to become comfortable in who I am, and he helped me with that. He helped me with that.
So tell us more about how did he help you?
Well, beside my mother and my wife, Dr. Charles Edward Booth could say jump, and I say yes, sir, how high. So in that particular vein, he really gave me permission to be my authentic self. I did not grow up with my biological father, but he became that father presence for me. And in a very meaningful and intangible way, gave me the release, and like my sister, Reverend Shalita just said, gave me the permission to be my authentic self. And I think that for most preachers, we bring strands of different people who influence us. But then when you find that sweet place where you are able to be you, it's a wonderful, liberating thing.
We are also just delighted that we have two people from Emory here, by the way. It's just like an Emory thing. And there is a student whose names I will not mention, Lawrence, who's here also, who had just visited Emory and is examining what Candler is doing. But Dr. Clea Williams, your ministry and your work intersects in a variety of ways. Not only from worship and liturgy, but you are also a dancer, and you did a beautiful job today preaching, and we're grateful. First time here at Trinity that you worshiped with us, and we're just thankful that you're here.
The next time you are offended, I invite you to look your offender in the face and shake your head and say, I'm sorry you don't know. I'm sorry you don't get it. I'm so sorry you missed it. Then walk away with your whole soul intact and simply pray, God, forgive them, for they don't know. God bless you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
How does dance influence and inform how you preach?
So being a dancer means I am fully embodied. So everything that I do comes through my whole body. So my own spirituality is very much like I don't know God outside of my body. It's completely connected. So in preaching, the preparation, the proclamation, it has to dance. It has to move in me. And so as I am writing and as I'm proclaiming, if I don't feel the dance happening, then I'm out of alignment. I'm outside of myself, because I know Spirit is working in me when I am dancing. And so all of it has to come together. So even in my movements, and I try to be conscious of it when I'm in the pulpit, but I can't stand still. So I am even moving to a rhythm, and I'm hearing the rhythm as I'm preaching. I hear the rhythm as I'm typing it. I hear one change to another. I hear pace as breath. Where do I catch my breath? Where do I hold my core? Like all of that, the dance training literally just becomes a part of the process.
So what's one of the most difficult moves in dance, and how does that relate to preaching for you?
The most difficult moves. That's hard. I think I won't say difficult, but one of the moves that takes the fullness is a grand jeté, a very large leap. And it takes proper posturing to get yourself off the ground and proper posturing to land softly. And that is a big part of even kind of the shape of how I preach. I'm Baptist, but I'm not a hooper. I don't do that part. I have to land softly so we have something to walk away with. And so I need the power and the core to take me up. But then we need the control to bring us back down. So we actually are anchored when we come back down.
Oh, that's a beautiful image. Have you preached on the different moves of dance?
I have not. You just gave me something.
Okay, I need to hear that
There it
sermon.
is,
I need
yes.
to hear that
There it is.
sermon.
You just gave me something. I
Yeah,
have not.
that would be absolutely beautiful. What would you say, or let me ask this, what dancer has informed your preaching?
So I'm going to say Alvin Ailey because that's where all of my training was steeped out of. At the point where I came into the fullness of myself as a dancer happened in high school when I was going back and forth from LA to New York, and I was training with Alvin Ailey's American Dance Center. And there I learned a lot about the connection between dance and spirit. We see it in Alvin Ailey's Revelation all the time. I never paid attention to it until I actually started studying at the studio. And the reality that my spirituality is completely connected with everything I'm doing in daily life. And so while I'm a 16-year-old and I'm out here playing and dancing with my friends, I'm also connected and learning and choreographing and training and teaching dancers in the church. And it's all connected. There's no separation. And so that, I think his own way of entering in and understanding dance and the way that he just did a lot of groundbreaking work in dance for Black dancers, that influenced me. And stylistically, there was a lot of influence. He was trained under Lester Horton and Martha Graham. And so this real rootedness and connectedness to earth and to the ground and to your foundation and to like this real base that you hold in your dance, that's a big part of how I've been shaped. Yeah.
We are also delighted that we have someone from Brooklyn with us today, who has connections to the South, but Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, who is the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, New York. And you did a beautiful job today, and we are grateful that you are with us today.
How has Jesus transformed you? I'm looking at some folks who are not what they used to be because Jesus touched you. I'm looking at some folks who don't hang with folks they used to hang with because Jesus transformed you. And when he uttered those final words, "It is finished," the one thing he didn't finish was you. I'm here to declare today, Jesus is not finished with you yet.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you.
No, Pastor Tisha, you have unique roots. I was not given any type of hyperbole when I introduced you today and said that you have an ancestor that landed in McIntosh County.
Yes.
Sapelo Island, who is one of the early Africans who landed on these shores and brought something very unique. Could you share a little bit about your family history?
Sure. So my family are descendants of Sapelo Island, Georgia, and my great-grandfather 4 times is Bilali Muhammad, who actually brought Islam to the States. And it was really by happenstance that my brother, who studied at Northwestern, found what is called the Bilali Diary. And what people thought was his actual diary turned out to actually be an Islamic, sort of a West African treatise, a new member's manual for Islam, if you will. that he began to write. And he was just remarkable in his stance, in his prowess. There's a story that talks about during the Civil War when islands were being attacked. His then slave owner put guns in his hands as a leader. That's how much he trusted him. And he told him, for my people, I cannot account for those of the Christian faith. And that is what he said. However, the story says that he died a Baptist deacon, but was still very, very much committed and steeped in Islam and spoke 4 languages, had several wives, several children. It is a rich, amazing history. And I've always wanted to go to Morocco for whatever reason. I don't know. Morocco was always top 2 on my list. And about 3 years ago, I went to Morocco by myself for the first time. And I was just, the connection was immediate, hearing the call to prayer and just seeing so much Islamic influence. And it felt like a part of me. And I didn't, and now I understand why. And so I have a nameplate that I wear, my name in Arabic. And I always say, I think that's how my granddad would have wrote my letters, my Arabic name. So it's a super rich history. Wow. Super rich history.
So your great-grandfather, 4 times, 4 times, was a writer.
Yes.
And you are a writer. You now have a writer's retreat. Is that correct?
I do. I'm working on a writer's retreat for pastors and preachers on Sapelo, where people can just come and retreat and relax, write or not. But the Atlantic Ocean, many days I've gone and just had the ocean, not the beach, the ocean to myself. Beautiful place to write. Actually, I wrote my first book. First draft of my first book, I See You Sis, I wrote on the porch on Sapelo Island, Georgia. It's just a beautiful place to connect. And so, yes, that's one of my endeavors, to create what I'm calling sacred Sapelo, where writers and...
How does Sapelo find its way into your preaching and your ministry?
Sapelo grounds me. I'm not a very grounded person. I have to be intentional about grounding. When I'm on Sapelo, I'm rooted. I'm clearer thinking. I'm creative. I'm imaginative. Nature is where I connect with God. Nature is where I find God. I don't think you can look at something like the ocean or feel a breeze and not have a God consciousness. It just doesn't. That's just where God is for me. And so Sapelo feeds into that. It's the colors, it's the scents, it's the sounds, it's the food, it's the family, it's this connection to community that if people know you're there, they're going to call, say, hey, a storm's coming, you may want to, or did you eat? We have some food for you. Things that don't happen in that way in Brooklyn. So Sapelo grounds me and helps me to be more clearer thinking.
Now, you said your mother read a book to you that grounded you between Brooklyn and Georgia.
Yes.
Share a little bit about that.
My mother was very intentional about us knowing that we were both city mice and country mice. That's what's the name of the book. The name of the book was City Mouse, Country Mouse. And she read it to all of us because she wanted to understand that Sapelo was just as important as Brooklyn and vice versa. And so I'm just as comfortable on a Brooklyn stoop as I am on the Sapelo porch. Both feel very much like home to me, which is why I think Bridgehampton works for me. It's also a mix of both those two worlds.
Now, for those who may not be familiar, tell us about Bridgehampton.
So Bridgehampton is, the easiest way to describe it is the area known as the Hamptons in New York. It is a beach town, some would say a rich people's playground. There are people who say all the time, you live so far. And I say, don't cry for me, Argentina. It is not a hardship. Waking up in Bridgehampton every day. And even there, I'm 3 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean. And so I'm often warmed by the idea that the same ocean I see in Bridgehampton is the same ocean that connects hundreds of miles away to home. So it's just a beautiful place, a lot of nature. I remember when I first got there as pastor, this one day I was walking out of the parsonage, and so there's bunnies hopping across the lawn. This is a true story. Bunnies are hopping across the lawn. Turkeys come walking across the parking lot. The deer are grazing in the corner, and a squirrel scurries up the tree, and you can hear the birds singing. I felt like I was in a Disney movie, like I was Cinderella. But in that moment, I was stopped in my tracks because the Spirit said to me, everything around you is doing what I have called it to do. Now you go do what I called you to do. It was a beautiful reminder that I was called to that work, to this work.
There's someone who is with us who we deeply love, who is a part of our family, who is a part of this Trinity family. We honor her as professor, as sage, as wisdom teacher, and friend. And that is Dr. Teresa Fry Brown.
In a complex sentence, you're supposed to use a conjunction and not a comma. But Jesus ain't need no conjunction. Jesus takes a breath, comma. And so when he takes that comma, power is in the punctuation, don't you see? When he takes a comma, he changes everything. You see, New Testament text didn't have no punctuation. Everything went together, but Jesus put a comma. See, if Jesus had say, I tell you today, which means I'm just telling you.
Hello. I'm happy to be back at my home in Chicago. Thank you, Dr. Moss, for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being here with us. Dr. T, you have such a magnificent way of engaging homiletically. Your love of language. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to love words so much.
I came to love words because of my grandparents, who had us reading everything they could get their hands on. I don't know if I've told this story before, but my grandparents desegregated the library in Sedalia, Missouri, so that the children that came from little country towns to stay at their house because they couldn't go to the schools there, and my aunts and uncles and mother could have books. So we were required to read 3 books a week. We could not play on Saturday until we went to the library. And we had to be, my uncles and everyone would come over and they would quiz us on the books to make sure that we knew what the storyline was and take it apart, the plot and all the characters, but also to memorize them because they valued the beauty of language, And so they helped me with that. And then in preaching, once I answered my call, one of the people that would come to Denver and do revivals all the time was Charles Adams. So we would sit and talk. And the only preaching class I ever had was a 2-week class with Charles Adams. And the next year I was his TA. So we talked about language. And so it carried over from what I was doing there. And so I read. I love the interplay of what you can do with sounds and words. And as a speech language pathologist, I work with making sure people could, in fact, use their language and understand their language and pronounce their language so that it's all over the place for me. So, yes.
So what would be one particular book from your childhood that had a huge impact on you?
From my childhood, this is going to sound strange. It was a book of poetry by Conti Cullen that my aunt read all the time. And I was excited because I was in school with people that didn't look like me. And it was wonderful to know that we could put words together too. And I do remember that. And she would, Teresa Lynn, take your time. We're going to say this a certain way. And then she would tell me about inflection and tell me about how to do pacing and the meanings that could come from it and how it attached to us, because I was in a school system that said that we couldn't learn. It was very helpful for my family to be involved in that linguistic kinds of endeavors, yes.
What's one poem that you've held in your heart?
There are too many of them. I'll be 73 in a week. Wait a minute. Let me think of this. It's not Cullen, but it is Hughes. The one that keeps me going in the academy is the Requiem, the Dream Deferred, because the richness of it about when the dream seems to fade, does it sour, does it stink, does it explode? And it helps me understand that I have to latch on to something so that does not happen. So no matter what the external forces are, there's a core in me that will not let my dream explode. Oh, now I need the box of Kleenex. Yes, that one keeps me going. And I often quote it, particularly when I'm doing things on social justice. So I find myself opening with that sometime. What happens to that dream deferred? Because I think I've known too many people in my life that the pressures of society, the pressures of being Black in America, strangled them. In many cases, gave them no wiggle room. I think about my brother going to Vietnam. He wanted to be a metallurgical engineer, went to Vietnam and was an engineer. But then when they started giving them drugs so they could build the bridges faster, and then gave him a general discharge because they used drugs when they came out, he was cynical for the rest of his life. And that's a dream deferred. There was nothing in that time. And I'm in law school now because in 1969, when I graduated from high school and wanted to be a lawyer, they said Black women cannot be lawyers. When I took 3 languages and I wanted to be an interpreter, they said Black women could not be an interpreter. So God kept giving me something else to do. When the church said I could not pastor, then God gave me a classroom. When they said I couldn't preach, I sang. So I think part of that poem helps me understand that I always have an alternative thing to do. But the first thing that I do, it doesn't mean I won't ever do it. It may mean I don't do it now. So I can still live in hope that I'm going to get back to it. And that's what I'm doing now. So people say, why are you in law school? I said, because I can be. But yes, I can. What are you going to do with it? I want to help Black seniors understand their rights in healthcare. And so I could not do that 42 years ago, but I can do it now. So I have my dream is not deferred.
Fascinating.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Now I want to ask each of you this question and think real quickly. What song or artist or musician, whatever it may be, embodies your preaching? What song or artist embodies your ministry? Who would that be?
I'll go. So for me, it really is my life theme song. I love to ask this question for people. Like, if your life had a theme song, what would it be? Mine is the theme from Mahogany. Do you know where you're going to? Performed by Diana Ross. And I love how the lyrics say, do you know where you're going to? Do you like the things that life is showing you? Do you know? And that's a question I'm always asking myself. Do you know where you're going? Do you like the things that life is showing you? And if you don't, you can change it. So I think that embodies my preaching preparation. Do I know where I'm going to? Do I like what the text is showing me? If I don't like it, how am I going to unpack it? What does this mean for the people listening to it? Yeah. So for me, it would be the theme from Mahogany.
Theme from Mahogany. All right.
I think for me, Marvin Gaye. And 2 songs really stick out. What's Going On and Makes Me Want to Holler. Yeah. And so both of those bring what I would call a prophetic, pastoral, and even priestly perspective as far as the preaching moment is concerned. To really deal with the tragedies and the traumas of being Black in America and in this world. So, yeah, Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye. We got Marvin Gaye and Mahogany, Diana Ross. We got a lot of Motown roots here. Right. Yeah. All right.
So I'm going to deviate completely. And my answer is actually going to be a whole lot churchier than I thought, but this is really and truly when I sit with it. Mississippi Mass Choir, Your Grace and Mercy. And that embodies my life and my ministry, because I've had the benefit to come along after amazing women who've blazed trails, so I didn't have to take the hard hits. And I really see that as being God's grace and mercy over my life from day one. So every place that I've stepped into, in ministry, in dance, in everything, there's always been someone who's gone before me. And then I've always had access to their mentorship. So that, yeah, it would be grace and mercy.
Grace and mercy. All right.
Okay. Kind of sort of two songs. Nina Simone, Young, Gifted, and Black. Because I was very active in those time periods, trying to make sure that we had a space and a voice. And so I find myself saying to giving the song to younger Black students now, because they're told so much that they cannot do. And then because my preaching is focused on social justice and hope, it's a change that's got to come. And even when it's painful to sing it, I still play that very loudly in my car on the way to work. And sometimes on the way to pulpits that I know are not welcoming, or they invite me because I'm a novelty and they're trying to prove that they support women. And so those two songs mean a lot in terms of what I try to accomplish in preaching, that there's a prickly hope that sometimes causes bloodletting. But I know I'm still alive because I can feel the pain. So yeah, those two songs. And because I have a 2-year-old grandson, he's going to learn both of those songs before I get up out of here. Because I need him to know that society is structured for him not to survive. And I want him to feel that there are people around him that for generations have done so because of the melodies that tell us we can. Yeah.
Where are the spaces all of you feel affirmed and filled outside of, typical family? What are some of those spaces where you go to be refilled, or the people that assist you in being replenished?
This is going to sound strange, but books. Classical books, as well as the last thing that someone wrote. Because we are as women, as we talk about critical reflection, and I'm inspired and filled and encouraged when I read Cole Riley, when I read something by Love Secrets, when I read something about different disciplines, and when I can just sit and read trash novels, but when I can just sit, that gives me that, because I'm at a stage in my life where the people that I used to go to gain that kind of re-energizing are no longer here. And I do not want to be an old, angry Black woman. And so I listen to students. We have a cadre of Black women at the seminary that support each other. There are women in ministry who support well. I have younger brothers everywhere that call and check on me, that are not family, that will text me or say, Dr. T, how you doing? And that keeps me going. So I either read, or there are people that I don't even know. I will go places and they'll say, I was praying for you last night. And that keeps me very energized.
I would say there are two places. So one is the beach. I grew up on the beach. I learned very early, sitting at the ocean taught me that life is so much bigger than me. And so when I need to be restored, I get by a beach to be reminded of how vast God is and that life is so much bigger than me. And that's hopeful. And then the other space are the Black women in my life who just let me be me. We have one of them right here with us, who just say it's okay to be fully you and let me laugh, let me complain, let me cry, let me sit in silence, but just really let me be fully myself.
For me, it's two places. Anytime I'm in the presence of my nieces or nephews, I love being a Tia. I love being it's one of my greatest joys. And they are just so fun, and they're so silly, and they remind me to have fun, and they do things to intentionally make me laugh. And I think for the younger ones, just kind of seeing the world through their eyes and watching them discover and wonder, because I think we don't live in a world of wonder anymore. You can press a button and find the answer to anything that you want. And I remember growing up, a rock could hold your interest for hours. And there's no sense of wonder in the world. And it makes me really mourn for our children that there's no sense of wonder, like nothing's going to surprise them anymore. So watching the world kind of through their eyes, that the age that they do still have some sense of wonder is just so heartwarming. And then the other place, believe it or not, is in my own mind. When in those rare moments where my plate is not full and things are kind of running smoothly, where I just get a chance to sit down and imagine. That's a really safe space for me, where nobody has to understand it but me. I like that space.
Monticello, Mississippi.
Love it.
Going home. My biological father died during COVID. So my mother is still alive. And I get my best rest at my mother's house. Where I'm not Reverend Doctor. I'm Chucky. That's my nickname.
I love it.
And she does this thing for me that just blesses my soul. When I go home, I want some fried catfish and seafood. Praise Black Jesus and His Mama Mary.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's where I get restored, Otis. Going home with my mother and hanging out with my other siblings. Home, Mississippi, Monticello. Yeah, 5656 Robin Wood Road.
Well, I have to say this has been an absolute blessing to me, for our congregation, to have you all with us, to be able to share your gifts and also to share a little bit about yourselves. This will be broadcast and you can share with other people. Hey, we can check out the final word on the YouTube channel at Trinity United Church of Christ. But I also want to thank our media team for putting this together. They work so very hard. They are a dream team of amazing individuals. And we thank you for being with us. We thank everyone for joining us. We invite you to visit us at Trinity United Church of Christ. Or if you're in the Bridgehampton area, you've got to come to First Baptist. If you are in Charlotte, you got to make sure that you make your way over to St. Paul. If you're in Atlanta, you better go to Providence. You got to make sure that you visit one of these locales. You will certainly be blessed by the ministry there. So thank you very much. If you are in Atlanta, you come by. You got to make sure. Give an advertisement, please.
Please come to Candler School of Theology at Emory University, 1531 Dickey Drive in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm on the 5th floor.
There's a young man behind the camera who is so excited that he had the opportunity to listen to possibly 2 of his future professors sitting right here. That's Brother Lawrence here. And we hope that if you choose Candler, we know that you will be in good hands. Or if there's some other institutions, we're going to support you, wherever you choose. But we're grateful that you are here today. And thank you all for joining us for the final word.